Okay, so today I want to talk about an article appearing on resilience.org, and it's discussing Nadita Bajaj, who is basically the director at Population Balance. So, right off the bat, she starts the article with rich white men want us to have children. Um, and then she introduces herself not just with her name, but with her identity. She is a brown female and definitely not wealthy. So this becomes kind of like the driving force for her whole idea about who expects who to have children and who isn't having children and who is having children. It's all based on identity. Um, and then she goes on to say in the article, critiquing pronatalism does not mean she is an anti-natalist in the sense of haranguing people not to have children. Bajaj rejects anti-procreation or voluntary human extinction arguments which she thinks are simplistic. Anti-natalism and anti-life and is a Antinatalism and anti-life, anti-human position reduces 3.5 billion years of evolutionary processes to a utilitarian calculus of joy versus suffering to justify non-procreation and ends up inappropriately blaming those who have little say over their own reproduction, she said. Our goal is a world where people are neither pressured into having children nor scorned for having them, and where people arrive at reproductive decisions with maximum autonomy, education, and informed responsibility. So, first of all, when I was introduced to antinatalism, it wasn't under pressure. No one was, lambasting me with arguments why I shouldn't have children. What attracted me to antinatalism is it made sense. It made logical sense, and that's what got me hooked in. I think part of where she's getting emotional about it is basically that very thing. It makes sense, and making sense actually goes up against, well, basically 3.5 billion years of evolutionary processes, right? So she has a sentimentality about evolutionary processes that doesn't really fit. And I'll explain why. Well, first of all, like you have these feelings inside of you about life, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And she doesn't have children, by the way, but we all have these feelings inside of us of having children and the continuation of the human race, et cetera, et cetera. And antinatalism basically says that, well, we shouldn't have children. So that runs up against a very strong emotional drive to have children. And that's probably where she's feeling that forceful kind of scolding from antinatalism, but there's really no scolding or force being leveled there. It's just two very different views kind of running up against each other. One is based on philosophical logic and one's based on emotion. And the one on philosophical logic should make more sense and should be the winner of that debate. So that's where that's probably coming from. And then secondly, this whole thing about 3.5 billion years of evolution, evolution doesn't care. It has no feelings. It doesn't care about what we do and how we're doing it. Evolution just tells us how we got here. It doesn't tell us why we got here, why we're reproducing, why we're procreating. It's just a blind process that's been in the making since who knows when, right? 14 billion years ago, who knows? But it doesn't tell us why we're here or what we should be doing. Morality does. Human morality tells us what we should be doing, and the morality of the situation is on the side of antinatalism because it's against human suffering. So again, she's placing too much emphasis on this 3.5 billion years of evolution. It doesn't that has no say in it. Murder, for instance, like that has a long history as well, right? We don't want to preserve murder, right? There's no sentimentality about murder, right? Um, so there's that. But going back to the whole identity thing, which she starts out the article, with, being brown and female and definitely not wealthy. Well, not her specifically, but I'm sure that throughout the article she talks about that. Um, Antinatalism doesn't discriminate. It doesn't talk about, well, the wealthy should have children and the poor shouldn't, or the poor should and the wealthy shouldn't. Antinatalism is across the board. No one should have children. No one. No, it doesn't matter which country you live in or who your parents are or anything like that. No one should be having children. So I just want to say that this whole thing about, identity factoring into who should have children and who's telling who to do what, like it makes sense to a certain level, a sociological level, maybe, because maybe white people are disproportionately more wealthy than poorer people, and you could get into those types of arguments, but they don't really hold up in the face of antinatalism. Like, antinatalism just says no more children, none whatsoever. So the article beginning with identity as a kind of base is kind of a non-starter for me. But if you want to read the article yourself, you could go to resilience.org and look for Nadita Bajaj, Confronting Patriarchy, Pronatalism, and Population Denial. And it's under the environment category. It was published on June 11th, 2026. And yeah, it's on there. It's also on my blog, Spiralvent, if you want to go check that out. And yeah, that's about it. Okay, bye.